Well, BBC reporter Laura Trevelyan, whose ancestors kept slaves in Grenada, says her family hopes to set an example by handing over £100,000 in reparations to their descendants. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, a panel studying reparations has proposed a $5 million payment to every black resident of the city to compensate them for historic harm. Well, that proposal is being discussed publicly today. Is this a sensible way of righting historic evils, or is it actually just sowing more division? Well, joining me in the studio is TalkTV contributor Esther Krakue, who wrote a very striking article for the Daily Mail about this today, alongside columnist and author Matthew Syed and TalkTV contributor Paula Rhone-Adrien. Well, welcome to all of you. Esther, I loved your piece today.
Thank you.
Because, to me, this is all a bit ridiculous. The idea that somehow it's going to make any tangible difference to start doshing out hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds, dollars around the world to people who had descendants involved in slavery, I think it's woke virtue signalling gone nuts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an obsession with white liberals to publicly spit shine their halos. But the irony is, you know, the money that her family received in compensation of getting rid of their slaves was about, in today's money, £3 million. So actually, £100,000 is not really it's not even 10% of what they received. That's the first point. And also, once you start going down that route, there's so many ways you can sort of skin this cat. So if you have a mixed race person with a black father who was a descendant of slaves and a white mother who was a descendant of slavers, who pays reparations? Does that mixed race person have to pay? I mean, there's so many ways to
And in the case of that BBC journalist, her family were also responsible for pretty ugly behaviour in Ireland, for example.
Exactly.
What happens there?
Well, she said nothing about that.
Right, and I saw people on Twitter who are Jewish say, well, what happens to us then?
Yeah.
Right, so in other words, once you start the concept, I'll bring in Matthew. Once you start this concept of reparations for historic ills, where does it end, and who do you include and who do you leave out?
I think that's the problem. I have no problem with an individual deciding they want to give their money to reparations or any other charitable cause of their wish. The problem comes when the state decides to use public money. That will be hugely divisive. It may sound good to some people, particularly on the left, on the progressive left.
Even when it was state-condoned discrimination?
Even then.
Because that's what we're talking about when we talk about state.
But for the following reason, once you start, as you, I think, rightly pointed out, once you start specifying the criteria under which the money is given out, it will create huge controversy and division. And, of course, it raises other questions.
In the same way that racism has.
Well, I speak as somebody who's mixed race. My father was born in India. My mother is Welsh. The question I've got for you, you're in favour of reparations, is as a country that was colonised, should I, as an ancestor of somebody...
Let him ask the question.
We're discussing it now.
In your analysis, should I be the beneficiary of reparations as somebody whose father grew up in the British Empire?
Right.
I don't know, because I haven't been able to analyse your specific scenario. So I couldn't possibly answer that question now. But what I can add to this discussion... What I can add to this discussion...
Be specific, then.
So my father was born in Hyderabad, the south of India. He moved to Pakistan after partition. Property was effectively confiscated and then came to Britain to study law. I'm his son. I may have been wealthier had that not happened.
OK, so...
I can give you more details.
So do you not think that the opportunity should be there for that land to be returned to your family?
I think...
In the same way that we had the Marshall Plan...
Where's the starting point,
in the same way that we've had the Marshall Plan, in the same way that the slave owners were paid for the loss of their slaves.
What about the people that were victims of the Norman Conquest?
The British government has only just finished paying that debt off in 2015. In the same way that the American government took responsibility and made reparations to the Native Americans.
Paula, how is it going to help?
The Japanese who were interned during World War II. But you can say, OK, but this is what we're talking about. There are very poignant examples of where reparations was right and which you wouldn't deny were right.
How can it be right for a place like San Francisco to even have the concept of giving millions out to all the residents who happen to be black? How can that make any difference? How can that improve racial equality in that city? It can't. It can only have the opposite effect. It can only bring in deep resentment and unrest, right?
If I answer the question, what they're doing is they're discussing it in the same way that we are now. What they are doing is they are looking at the stats. And in America, what we understand is that white people are 10 times more socioeconomically in a positive position than those of colour. They know that. And so what they're doing is they're looking at the situation and they're saying, how can we make
which colour are you referring to,
how can we make the playing field...
Colour of Asian people or Hispanic people or Black Americans?
The playing field.
Well, she's asking you a question.
So I understood that they were talking about black people.
Oh,
Esther.
so which black Nigerians who out-earn white Americans or black Americans?
No, but they're talking about specific members of their community.
There are many ways you can skin this cat. Because I could talk about black Americans that are of Nigerian and Ghanaian descent who actually out-earn white Americans.
Right.
My family would be getting reparations under the scheme, but their ancestors actually benefited from the slave trade.
We're talking about the general here, aren't we? That's what we're talking about, the general.
I
don't think I would have a claim, sadly.
Why should we empower the government?
I don't think I would have a claim, but there are a number of people who do.
Explain to me why the government should be empowered to take this on a case-by-case basis and skin this cat in as many ways as they want and decide who should be the beneficiary of this. Why do they have the right to do that?
It will tear Western societies apart.
Well, yeah.
We need to, if I may just finish the one, if we need to get to a situation which Martin Luther King articulated brilliantly in the mid-60s, where people are judged on the content of their character rather than the pigmentation of their skin.
It isn't a level playing field. That is an ideal that doesn't exist,
You ask for
Matthew.
criteria. Well, as you rightly pointed out, white working class people in this country are some of the poorest demographics. How are they going to feel about richer descendants of black Africans getting reparations?
But also,
it's absolutely
Paula, let me just jump in.
I mean, you do notice that I haven't had the opportunity in the same way that the others have
I have a wider point generally, which is about this sort of constant drumbeat now to make people atone for the sins of centuries ago.
Right.
I think it is completely regressive to do this. We've surely got to move in the way society has moved. There isn't slavery, anything like the way there was hundreds of years ago.
How has society moved in terms of that level playing field? How is it right that the slave owner receives reparation, but the slaves don't?
Well, this is the thing. How do you remedy it? Do you know how you remedy that? Do you know how you remedy that?
Me to finish,
but do you know how you remedy
because
that?
People can read your article.
But
how do we rectify that when it only finished? The British government only finished paying that in 2015.
Totally
Why is nobody uncomfortable about that? Why is nobody uncomfortable about the Marshall Plan? Nobody's uncomfortable about that.
You're well-educated, wealthy lawyer.
I'm lucky, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're far luckier than anyone that's
By the way,
that's
that's what Rishi Sunak said.
And I'm
He's fortunately super rich.
What right
I'm not super rich, but I am fortunate.
But you're very
I'm grateful
fortunate,
for that.
and you're certainly more fortunate than I did growing up.
Sorry, Esther, what are you talking about? What do you know about me? Esther, what do you know about my life?
Don't talk over each other.
What right do you
wait,
have?
let Esther speak.
What right do you have as a privileged, wealthy, well-educated woman? What right do you have for reparations for something that you never experienced? I can't even claim that. No one can claim that.
But Esther, I have just said to you, I don't think I would have a claim. And there are many people who wouldn't have a claim.
What about
but that doesn't mean, because I don't have an opportunity, that I shouldn't stop others from having an opportunity.
What about
you wouldn't have said that to a Native American person.
May I ask, what about...
You wouldn't have said that to a Jewish person.
Let Matthew speak.
You wouldn't have said that to one of the Japanese.
What about black Americans who are the descendants of slaves who are now billionaires?
What about them?
Well, would they be eligible for your reparations?
It's not my reparations.
Well, your argument... let me rephrase it. Your argument in favour of them.
It's my conversation about people having the opportunity to.
But do you think they should get it?
They probably not.
And who should pay it?
Oh, so it'd be means tested?
It could possibly be, absolutely.
And who should pay it?
There are options.
Should mixed race people
and it's
pay
about that discussion, and that's exactly what's happening at the moment. There's a discussion that's ongoing about how it's going to happen and how it would
but
work.
I don't agree with any of it.
In the same way that you would have a discussion about positive discrimination. In the same way you would have a discussion about levelling the playing field.
Some stage, that's a discussion where someone can actually discuss something with you, which involves you stopping talking for a second. I have a strong view about this, that none of it seems right to me. That making people pay today for the sins of centuries ago, I think is completely ridiculous. And I think what kind of society, particularly the cost of living crisis, coming out of a pandemic, suddenly is dishing out billions
in
reparations to people who had no personal experience of it.
The British government had to take a loan out to pay the slave owners. Do we get that money back?
Who's we?
Why don't
the government get that money back?
What do you think Martin Luther King would say? Let me ask you a question.
I mean, when I ask a question, no one wants to answer.
Well, actually, I'm asking you a question.
The slave owners were paid.
Let me ask you a question first.
For the loss of their slaves.
That was in 1837.
And the government only finished paying it off in 2015. Should the British government get that money back?
Look, I have a different question for you, which is this. What would Martin Luther King say if he was still with us about this concept?
I don't know.
He would think it's ridiculous.
What do you think he would say?
He was a man who wanted unity. He wanted unity.
And
this will be the most divisive thing.
That's suggesting that I don't want unity. I'm not suggesting that it's divisive. I'm suggesting that we talk about the options available.
The Nation of Islam, run by Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, they wanted a separate homeland for black Americans within the borders of the United States. They were completely against the integrationist agenda of Martin Luther King. And had they won that argument, it would have been the most retrograde step for America and the West. This is going down precisely the same trajectory. It is going to stir racial division. It will destroy the fabric of the United States. We've got to get past this.
And in the meantime, those who haven't been able to overcome, those who have been held back, you are saying to them, quiet.
No, I'm saying let's create a fairer society.
OK, so how do we do that, Matthew?
Well, that is what...
How do we create a fairer society?
That is what politics is all about. Make an argument, stand for Parliament.
That's tomorrow night's show. How do we make society a fairer place? It's a really interesting debate. Honestly, it is. It's a very good debate, and I'm not sure what the answer is. I just don't think the answer is shelling out billions to people who had no personal experience of the slavery, because I don't see how that helps anything, frankly.
And I think the point is that that personal experience lives on. I think for those who argue about reparation, the difficulty lives on.
I've given you the final word, because that's the kind of guy I am.
Thank you.